Okay, so if I mention Square and PS1, you'd probably think of RPGs with a few notable exceptions. That's expected. That's what they're known for. But they had this age of experimentation where they combined certain mechanics to see what works. A byproduct of this period is Racing Lagoon, released in 1999. Racing Lagoon is labeled as a high-speed driving RPG. It's basically a racing game with some RPG mechanics. It's these mechanics that make it stand out, and arguably ahead of its time. Not to mention the highly stylized form of presentation this game has. Combine this together and you have a very unique and memorable experience despite the game's flaws. In my perspective, the game can be divided into two portions. The racing aspect, which is very self-explanatory, and the RPG aspect, which includes the story, the mechanics that are story mode only, and how the story progresses. It's an easy distinction because the game likes to present itself as the aforementioned high-speed driving RPG first, and then racing game second. This makes for an oddly weird and arguably incomplete racing game experience, but I'll get into that later. For now, let's talk about the RPG aspect of the game. Story. You play as Sho Akasaki, a member of the Bay Lagoon racing team who is competing against other rival gangs to become the fastest legend. However, Sho is an amnesiac, so not only is he racing to be the best, but he is also uncovering who he is. Honestly, the basics of the plot is a bit formulaic. I think that even for 1999, this type of story is a bit overused. And it doesn't help that there is a huge language barrier, so for all we know, the synopsis is oversimplified. Not to mention, somewhere along the line, a corporation called Wantech and a drug called Diablo becomes a part of the plot. And most of the information you can get about them is only available through a fandom wiki that still feels a bit lacking. Our best bet would be a fan translation, but I haven't seen one. So here's to hoping that one will be released in the years to come. Moving on, the story is divided into nights where the player must drive around Yokohama City. This is where the RPG mechanics start to show themselves. While driving around, you can encounter and challenge other street racers, upgrade your car, partake in optional side events, or advance the story. Everything happens and transitions to and from the overworld map. This is something that's really unique for its time and would later be a major mechanic of other racing games such as the Need for Speed series. Going back, you can challenge racers by flashing your light or running into a speeding street racer. Doing this nets you experience points, and if you win, you can acquire a car upgrade from the beaten enemy. However, if you lose, a part will be taken from you instead. The car has three main parts: the engine, the body, and the chassis. Each part has a certain amount of accessory slots, giving the player a huge amount of customization. Not to mention that each part can be changed too, as long as certain requirements or limitations are met. This gives the player the capability to turn a car to what they want and what they are comfortable with. Gameplay. The actual racing is pretty f***ing weird. In fact, because of how weird it feels, I can't tell if the gameplay is bad or if I'm bad. And I'm not pretending to be good at this game. It's just that the game feels inconsistent at times, leaving for an experience that is much to be desired. For starters, turning is wonky in this game. You auto-drift, so you need to carefully tap the left or right D-pad buttons or else you'll be drifting during turns. This could lead to a side bump that can easily cost you a win in a race. Speaking of winning, sometimes it feels like you need to have a near-perfect run without any mistakes while racing. If you do make a mistake, it can get hard to regain the advantage that you were able to create during the early parts of the race. This causes the game flow during parts grinding to be all over the place. Remember, you gamble your parts away against an enemy racer. If you lose, it sets you back, meaning there's more stuff for you to grind and catch up to. So you could theoretically be spending a lot of time grinding for parts just to beat a difficult rival or encounter instead of progressing the story. So what about the pure racing aspect, the one that's not a part of the story? Well, the only other game mode is called Two Warriors Battle Mode, where you race against a second human player or a computer. You choose from 7 default racers along with an option to load your car from the story mode. At the start, there are only 3 courses, but they're good at letting the player experience the basics of the game. that's about it really. This is what I meant earlier by how the game presents itself as a high-speed driving RPG first and racing game second. There is a major lack of game modes, features, or elements that you can see in other racing games like Gran Turismo 2 or Ridge Racer 4. There's no time trial. You can only race against a single enemy, even though the prologue of the story mode shows that you will race with 7 other people. It feels like there is a huge imbalance in the content, and while I understand that I'm an idiot for expecting something from a game that prides itself as an RPG game first, it just feels incomplete. Most of the stuff I mentioned are parts of what you expect from racing games, and I wish that Square didn't just hope that the player is willing to play the story mode and replay it again and again and again. I wish they rather made the story mode to supplement the racing, not the other way around. Now that's not to say that there are no redeeming qualities to the game. The game's most standout feature is in its presentation. The game does a lot of things to make the experience look cool and stand out. For example, the UI feels like it came out of Persona 3, a game that is to be released years later on. The style pops out thanks to the colors or the positioning of the text. It blends really well with the graphics and feel of the game. It complements the cool nightlife atmosphere that the game tends to evoke. It honestly feels like a scene out of those late night city pop compilations. Now, while the main menu is great, the in-race menu is not. You press start and just look at this. It feels so simple and bare bones compared to what greets you at the main menu. There's a severe lack of feedback and intuitiveness to it. There's no option to simply retry or quit the race. You have to complete it even if it means you're losing and wasting your time. Oh, you finish a race and you want to skip the replay? Then press start, choose exit replay, and then press start again to exit the pause menu. Then it will stop the replay. What? But hey, at least in story mode you have the option to give up. That's a time saver. The graphics are good. The car models and the tracks look nice. The overworld map is also really good. Nothing about it looks incomprehensible. However, the CG models for the characters and cutscenes are pretty hit or miss for some people. The best way I can put it is if Final Fantasy VIII and Tekken 1 had a baby, and the child says, "I'll be more anime than you, and I'll be cooler but edgier than you." Personally, I don't think it's bad. I'm rather entertained by it. There's a certain charm to how clunky the animations are. And if anything, I think the game makes good use of the graphics when presenting the game. It definitely feels like you're watching an anime. Just look at how they present the chapters in the story. Or how about the conversations or monologues characters have? And the music. Holy shit, the music is no doubt the best thing about this game. The music is described as a jazz techno fusion, the smoothness of jazz combined with the fast-paced electronic music, further giving an identity to the game. From the intro alone, you know your ears are gonna have a good time. And as another example, listen to the main menu music. Again, it complements the game's atmosphere and setting. This is one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard from a PS1 game. It stands on its own. That's not to say the music carries the entire game. Rather, I'm saying listen to the fucking soundtrack, you won't be disappointed. Racing Lagoon is one heck of an experience. It's a game that does things ahead of its time, but oddly enough feels trapped by mechanics of its time. I'm honestly infuriated by some of the game mechanics, but my main gripe is that there is definitely something good here behind my nitpicks and complaints. The game isn't that bad, but I admit that it's a challenge to really get into. I actually want to give it another chance, preferably when a fan translation is out, but that's for another time. Get this if you're a PS1 collector, emulate it if you're curious, and don't forget to listen to the soundtrack. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi there! If you like the content, please subscribe as it helps the channel. If you want to hear my thoughts on games or for channel updates, then follow me on Twitter at KenAthomos. I also have a Coffee page if you want to further support the channel. Coffee support will be used to further improve the technical aspects of the channel. Thank you for the support. Take care!